Good afternoon and welcome to Webinar Wednesday. Today we are joined by Ty Greenhall, Industry Principal Healthcare at Medigate by Clarity, and Deral Heiland, Rapid7 Principal Security Researcher. Webinar Wednesday would like to thank our sponsor, Medigate by Clarity. As the world's most trusted healthcare cybersecurity company, Medigate by Clarity empowers HDOs to comprehensively monitor and manage risk across the healthcare extended Internet of Things environment. Whether it be through a medical device or a building management system, attack surfaces grow as connected assets expand, creating security blind spots that pose risks to availability, integrity, and safety. Clarity tackles these risks to ensure cyber and operation resilience are within your reach. So for more information, please visit clarity.com. Just a quick reminder about our Fall MD Expo. We're headed to the Caribe Royal Hotel in Orlando, Florida at the end of the month. So that's the 29th and 31st. So please join us for 3 days of education, networking, and the latest advances in medical technology product and services. Registration is open, so for more details, please visit mdexposhow.com. Also, there's a copy of the pre-show planner that can be found in the handout section of your webinar dashboard. I'd also like to just add that in its continued effort to promote and applaud the men and women in the HTM industry, TechNation magazine is introducing the Tech Choice Awards, also known as the Wrenches. Nominations are being accepted through November the 3rd in a variety of categories, including Association of the Year, ICO Employee of the Year, and Lifetime Achievement. Up to 13 wrenches will be awarded, with the winner selected based on 100% votes from those who make up the HTM industry, and the winners will be announced in the March 2024 issue of TechNation. Now, more details can be found in the handout section of your dashboard and also online at onetechnation.com/Tech Choice Awards. Okay, today's webinar is eligible for 1 CE credit from the ACI, and you can obtain your CE certificate by completing the post-webinar survey, which will be emailed 1 hour after the completion of today's webinar. You must complete the survey to receive your 1 CE credit from the ACI, and you'll be able to download the certificate directly from your computer once the survey is submitted. If you have any questions, you can reach us at webinar@mdpublishing.com. Let's kick off today's webinar by giving away one of our fabulous Webinar Wednesday t-shirts to the attendee that can tell me the answer to the following trivia question. October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, so what colour ribbon has become the universal symbol of breast cancer? Answer now using the questions feature on your dashboard, and I'll reveal the answer at the end of the webinar. We'll wrap up today's presentation with a live Q&A, so please submit your questions anytime using the questions feature on the dashboard. As I mentioned earlier, our presenters today are Ty Greenhall and Deral Heiland, and they will be discussing from discounts to dangers, navigating patient safety and cybersecurity with secondary market MedTech. Ty, you may begin whenever you're ready.
Well, thank you so much. And again, it's an honor to be here. I always enjoy this Webinar Wednesdays. How many years I've been listening to these? I've always gotten a lot out of them, so I'm delighted that I can give back a little bit here. Those awards sound pretty cool, and looking forward to seeing who the winners of those awards are. What else is cool is this webinar today. I think everybody who's logged in, email your friends, tell them to jump on, because this is going to be a little different. I've got we're going to be talking about some things, devices in a new way, a way that you probably haven't ever. You've been handling these devices, and you probably never looked at them. You've never looked at them the same after we're done, which I think is just a whole new twist to this. As you look at as you're managing devices and you think about cybersecurity, I think it's easy to think about, hey, well, procurement. Well, that's great. I can see how making sure we get devices that have better cybersecurity and maybe checking the risk on them, and then once we do have them, we need to continue to check the risk. And is there a new risk out? Is there a new vulnerability? What do we have? And which ones are more critical than others? And so it's but we don't always think about, okay, so now that we're unplugging this thing and we're going to throw it away, or we're not going to use it anymore. Why would that be a cybersecurity issue? Well, I can tell you the FDA is in their new powers of authority is they're thinking about cybersecurity. They're thinking about cybersecurity over the life cycle. So this is a life cycle type of perspective that we're going to try to get you to think about here today, but really on the decommissioning side. And so what's wonderful is today I have with me Deral Heiland, and I'll just say my name is Ty Greenhall. I'm the industry principal for healthcare at Medgate by Clarity, and I have been in the healthcare industry for, I don't know, 30 plus years, and always working with advanced technologies and just helping hospitals with their governance and adoption of these new technologies and operationalizing them. And so and also education, and this is just such a wonderful opportunity to have Deral here. Deral, if you could just kind of introduce yourself, a little bit about your background, so people understand who you are and what you do. And I'll first say that Deral has this really super cool picture that he gives me when we do these presentations together. So I had to try to get a black and white super cool picture. So I'm trying really hard over there with my my Dwayne Johnson The Rock look, but it's just not working. I'm still going to have to get something else because that is. So tell us about that picture, Deral, and then tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, that picture was it was actually taken by a friend. I was at a conference. The conference was a hacker conference, and what you see in the background is actually distillers for a brewery. So the hacker conference was actually in a brewery, and I was sitting there with my arms crossed, just staring off into space. And I kind of looked off to the side, and I seen him pointing the camera at me, and that's where it came from. And I'm like, hey, and he showed it to me, and I'm like, I want that picture. And I've been using it ever since. It was like absolutely a great picture he took, and it was
I,
all in black and white,
I can
which was
only imagine. I can only imagine that hackers in a brewery having a conference in a brewery can only lead to trouble. That's all I'm saying.
actually it went pretty good. It was
Mhm.
pretty civilized for what you would expect. Um, so that's always a plus.
So tell us
But
a little bit about yourself.
So, Deral Heiland, I am the Principal Security Researcher focused on IoT technology and OT technology at Rapid7. I've been at Rapid7 for about 10 years. My history goes back 20, 30 years, IT, and then threat and vulnerability management at a Fortune 500 company. I've always focused on the whole embedded tech concept from a security standpoint. In research I've done over the years. I worked as a pen tester for a decade, hacking and breaking into corporations and government agencies and stealing all their data. And also during that whole time was always doing research on the side, focusing on IoT technology and embedded technology and kind of what that means. So I've been doing that full time at Rapid7 for the last 6, 7 years. And it focuses across everything. It's everything from consumer to enterprise to medical tech, anything that it would be embedded that would fall into that weird category of IoT technology. I've focused on to really understand what that means from a security and threat perspective for people we share this with. I usually open source everything I do, all of the research I do, any papers I write, any information I gather. I often share that with others because my ultimate goal is about security, making security better. And if in my research and work that I've done, we can help better the world around security, then I've accomplished my goals.
That's awesome. So as we go through this, I may ask you to elaborate on a term or such, just because our viewers aren't always here today, aren't always as versed in the cybersecurity terms. When you say embedded tech, what do you mean by embedded tech?
Embedded tech would be devices that the operating systems and all that stuff are usually smaller. The devices are smaller. Everything is actually stored on memory chips versus hard drives or larger forms of storage. And often they're single function devices. unlike a laptop or a desktop or something like that, is a multifunction device. It can do any elaborate amount of things, but often embedded technology focuses on one thing. It's an infusion pump. Its purpose is to deliver medication and fluids to a human, as an example. An Amazon Echo device. This would be a device that has an audio capability to answer questions and deliver some level of content, usually very focused and direction in its nature.
Awesome. So I'll just say that Deral hasn't seen all these slides yet. So with my new AI capability for graphics, I'm having a little bit of fun there. That's not really Deral, but with the purpose of this whole presentation today, Deral, could you kind of explain, you wrote a paper, and what it was about, what the purpose of the investigation was, and just kind of overview it for us, and then we're going to go into detail on the different devices.
Okay, so I think the big thing is understand how I got to this point with what we're going to talk about. So I decided here about a year and a half, 2 years ago, that I wanted to delve into medical technology. I've done a lot of the other things. Let's expand my knowledge there. The goal of expanding my knowledge is Rapid7 has a lot of customers that are hospitals, medical organizations. They produce products. They may actually produce medical appliances, things like that. And I wanted to gain a level of knowledge around that industry and the technology. So we decided to pick infusion pumps. They had been done many times before, but we wanted to do it again. It was a very focused approach to look at vulnerabilities in infusion pumps. So we purchased a couple different brands of infusion pumps, originally the Baxter and the BD's Alaris, what we ended up looking. And as we were digging through this, and I was buying more devices and tearing them down and gaining access to the data on them and pulling firmware off them, I started noticing a trend. That trend was I was actually seeing data that shouldn't have been on these devices. I was seeing information as in Wi-Fi pre-shared keys, network configuration data. In one case, we even had Active Directory credentials on the device. So that's where the project spun up. Where it went from there was, let's step back, and in the big picture of things, let's pull a sample. Obviously, I don't have empty pockets. There are plenty of time. So we had a narrow sample. I think it was about 13, 14 devices across 3 different brands of devices that we purchased. And I started looking at these devices, and I pulled data off of it. And we found that we were able to get data off a large number of these devices. That was data for, I think, if I remember right, my last number was 5 major hospital chains, large ones, as an example. And that's where the paper went from there, and we got into a lot of technical detail, which we're going to discuss here even further. So,
yeah, that's. I think this is just fascinating. And so these are the three devices that you ended up taking a look at.
Yeah. The first 2 I started off was the Baxter Sigma Spectrum and the Alaris series from BD. Were the first 2 that I looked at, and that was part of the original let's look for vulnerabilities thing. And then we progressed out of there, and I started buying more devices, broken devices here, parts of devices that were taken apart, or even full functional devices. And I thought, typically the way I approach doing research, especially when I'm looking for systemic issues, I often like to look at 3 separate different products. I've always done that. It's kind of Deral's rule of 3. You need to, if you're thinking about a systemic issue on a larger scale, don't over narrow it. Don't pick one brand of device and go, hey, this impacts the whole industry. At least pick 3 different brands of devices that will be used, in this case, the Aspera, the Alaris, and the Sigma as part of that process.
And just to define some security terms for the group, I think these are important terms. There may be some others, but could you kind of let us know in some basic terms what these things are?
Yeah, service set identifier is kind of what you call your Wi-Fi. I think we all have Wi-Fi's at home. You either call it, I think I call mine Net 1, Net 4 as an example, and that's what you would attach your devices at home to. Well, it's no different than that when you get into hospitals or other organizations. They assign SSIDs. It may be the hospital name. It may be the hospital name attached to a location. Things like that, so you can narrow it all down. And then the other term on there, Wiggle. Wiggle is a wireless geographic logging engine online. So you go to wiggle.com, I think it is, and you plug in that SSID. I suggest everyone give this a try. Plug in your home SSID and watch. It'll probably show up in this database and show you a general GPS or geographical location of that data. Well, this is no different than if I buy something off the internet and the person who sold it to me decided not to clear the data off of it, whether it's a consumer or a hospital. I could usually pull this SSID off the device and figure out where it's located at, and figure out, and generally, especially if it's a business, who that business is.
That is just some scary. That's just some frightening information. Um, these are the things that people just don't think about. And then the pre-shared key.
Yeah, the Wi-Fi pre-shared key is kind of that password you use to log into your Wi-Fi with, and that comes in. And I don't know if I'll mention this here, but when we start thinking about the pre-shared key, often most of us will enter a name, a password. It's your dog's name and the year. Ralph in 2023. That may be your password. The underlying operating system on the device does not use that to authenticate with WPA as the pre-shared key. What it does is it combines that along with the SSID and creates a hash of 64 character hex string. And often that's what's stored because that speeds up connectivity. So just so you understand the difference between that password that you use to set up in your system is used to combine with the SSID to generate the key that's actually used to log on with. So when we start looking at embedded technology and are taking them apart, we don't always find the clear text password that they entered. We often find that 64 character key. Now, using a Linux system, we can either use the raw password that you used with the SSID, or we can just use that 64 character hex string. There's ways of doing that in a Linux system. So even though I don't get your password, but I get that string, 64 character string, I can use that to log on to Wi-Fi with. I hope that wasn't too confusing. I just
No.
think it's important to understand how that functionality actually works in general.
No, I think the crowd you've got here today is they're bordering on brilliant in their own ways. So I think that we're going to be able to change that. I think that the note that I walk away from here is that I need to not use my dog's name and the year. Now I have to go change my password. If it was that easy for you to figure out.
It's also important. Let me point out with WPA pre-shared keys. If you use something that's very simple and guessable, like your dog's name, those can be cracked. There's tools for cracking those. So basically what it is I can hear you communicating and authenticating to your access point with your password. And what I can do is I can force with some commands that authentication to deauth. If it's WPA or WPA2, deauth from your access point, and then capture you reconnecting, feed that capture string data into a cracker. And if you have a short Wi-Fi password, it is easy to crack. It can often be cracked in a couple hours. I remember years back working with one hospital, and we captured that. And it turned out it was like the hospital name, and with the hospital name with med security in it or something like that, but it was still under 12 characters, and we literally cracked it within a few hours. So something to think about when you're actually setting up these WPA, WPA2 pre-shared keys, that you make them long and complex, even for home, or
Yeah.
your neighbor may crack yours and be using your Wi-Fi to do things.
Yeah, I mean, this is, for me, this is always wonderful. It's like, why are they telling me to put in this long password? I can barely remember them all. And so this is always helpful for me to understand why, why I have to do something, especially something that I don't like doing. With the tools that I think in this article, and by the way, at the end we're going to have the link for the article, and everybody can go out and read it. It's a wonderful wonderful read, very educational. All this information will be in it, and you can share it with others in your organization, or this webinar. But you mentioned these are the type of tools that you used, and you can get those for fairly cheap too.
Yeah. So being able to buy these tools is simple. You can get instructions on how to do a lot of this stuff online to actually use these tools. Like a Flash programmer, I'm like, oh gosh, these things are fairly cheap. Sorry for ducking off there. Here's one. Fairly easy. You have a little chip holders, you plug the chip into it and you can read it. This one's a little more pricier. I just bought this as brand new one, but generally you can get those fairly cheap. Logic analyzers for looking at the communication on the device. A JTAG programmer, again, you can get those. I have $55 at the low end, but I've seen those that you can get for like 20 bucks. So when you start thinking about, hey, somebody can take my hardware that I sold or threw in the trash and pull critical data off of it, they're going to have a bunch of money to do that. In reality, this is all the tools I use for all these different devices. But if I had to do it on the cheap, the actual cheap, I can use a cheap soldering iron, some cheap equipment, and probably do this for under $100, $150, $200. This, having all this stuff here, just makes it easier. And as you can see, even if you go to the high end of this, you're still only looking at a little over $1,000 in some of the better equipment that would make this process much easier.
And when we get into the value of the medical record, so you get in and every medical record, $500 to $1,000. So if you can steal 1,000 records or 10,000, you get up into the 10,000, the 100,000 record. I mean, you're talking millions of dollars in value to resell them, and or ransomware. I think the average IBM cost of a breach in healthcare right now, they're saying that the average cost is $10 million. So I mean, it's just there's the bad guys are going to keep coming. So we have to learn about this. I say that the healthcare technology management, clinical engineering field, it's evolving to encompass at least an understanding of these capabilities. So as we kind of go to there's some pictures there for you to speak to, Deral, and I think we're going to start off on the Alaris, and if you just want to talk about the different types of attacks or the different types of approaches you used, because I know that's going to flow throughout the different devices, and so speak to what parts you think are important for this device.
So in this particular device, they actually have. This really comes down to what version you're on. So if you're before version 12 on this device, all the passwords for pre-shared key and stuff was held on a compact flash card. This is what I have in my hand right here. This was accessible from the back of the device. So you open up a little door, you reach in there, you can pull this out. That was actually reported as a vulnerability, I think 3 or 4 years ago. So what BD did was they actually changed the software to ensure that the passwords for the Wi-Fi are no longer stored on the card, but only stored on the memory chip. The thing is though, a lot of places are not upgrading or patching their devices, and a lot of times the devices are sold. So, and sometimes you can just buy these cards that have been pulled out of devices. And the cool thing with these cards is they don't do a process known as level wearing. So on modern chips, not modern flash chips, there's a process called level wearing. Basically, anytime I make a change to that card or that data, it would actually put the data in another place and then erase the low location. And by doing that, it does a process known as level wearing. It makes the overall silicon last longer because it isn't reading and writing the same spot until it kills it. It spreads it out and expands the life. Well, these devices don't do level wearing. So if you delete the data off of it and don't overwrite it, it's still recoverable forensically. It's just something to think about. And again, this contains your AES encryption keys for some of the authentication and communication, SSID information, obviously pre-shared key data can be stored on here, host name, domain, you name it. There's a lot of cool stuff on here. And it also contains the actual application code that the device runs on. So all the new firmware would actually be on this. So you can just pull this out and somebody has access to the firmware. The maintenance port was interesting. So I was thinking this thing had a maintenance port on the back, which is a RJ, a phone jack, a large like a Ethernet jack on the back of it. And I connected to it, and I ended up getting the software from somebody. I'm not going to say who, but I was able to get the maintenance software, and I wanted to take a look at it. Is the maintenance software give me the ability to purge the data off the device, because I wanted to do that. And then I also wanted to see, could I actually get access to the data and see it? So the tool was really good. BD designed a great tool. I could not actually see critical data with this. It hid all of it from me. It would let me make backups of all the configurations and write configurations to it, but none of that configuration data was accessible by me until I decided, well, the application is running on my desktop. The software that I'm communicating with is running on the infusion pump. The communication between the two, I just tapped into it. The lower left-hand picture at the bottom there, we can see all those wires attached up with this red Sele. That is a logic analyzer. So when I did a backup of the configurations or the passwords on the system, the application would ask me to set a password, and then it would store it encrypted so I could never get access to it. But between the device and the application, it's passing clear text over the communication line. So I just tapped into the wires coming off that RJ45 in the back and was able to capture everything in clear text. Again, the communication path is really not meant to be encrypted, nor probably should it be encrypted. But if I'm trying to extract data from a device, this is probably one of the most simpler ways because I can just hook a logic analyzer to it, have the application do what it's supposed to, and then I can see all the data in clear text coming off the device. The bottom one, the flash memory chip, a little more complex. That's kind of that center screen. You see that square block I'm pointing to, that PC28F128, which is what's known as a ball grid array flash memory chip. So this is, I believe it was a NAND flash chip. So all the connections on it isn't like the old style chips on boards where you had leads coming off the side that you could connect into and see. These are small, like 0.25 millimeter balls that are underneath the chip, between the chip and the board. And that's how it's attached. So you have to have specialized equipment. In this case, I used a infrared oven back here behind me, and I heat the whole board up until it gets up to the right temperature. Then I pick the chip off the board, clean it up, drop it into a custom reader socket for that, and I'm able to dump all the flash off there, and then of course search through it. The lower right hand corner is an example of me searching through all that data. Historically, if I want to steal your passwords, the answer is I need to know what your SSID is, because almost always data, SSID and the password are always stored in close proximity to on a flash memory. So all I have to do is know the SSID, search through memory until I find the SSID, and usually within 4 or 5 lines of it or close proximity of it, I'm going to find your password, your pre-shared key, whether it's in clear text, 64 character, or encoded somehow, potentially encrypted. Ever how you're storing that, I'm going to be able to find it because it's always going to be, always, I've never found it not within close proximity to the SSID. And they always think, well, it's an SSID. We don't need to encode or encrypt that. So crazy stuff.
So it is. It's fascinating and scary all at the same time. So as we think about all of these devices, they are one hooked to the network, so they're entry points. If I know what the Wi-Fi, the access codes are, I get in range, I can just connect right into the device, and then I have access now to the network, and I can start moving laterally and place my malware or what have you. The other is it's connected to the patient. While it's never happened before, but we have seen the ability to empty the contents of a medication in the bag to we're supposed to be given out over a 24-hour period, all given in 1 hour, which would in many cases kill the patient. So it's there are patient safety issues in and amongst this. I think everybody probably knows that, but I just wanted to take the reiterate the point. It's worth it's worth making that point. So the next one, the Baxter, was this a little different?
Some of it was, and some of it wasn't. Maybe it was a different methodology, but it's similar concept. In this particular case, the wireless battery. So we have the wireless battery, and we have the actual infusion pump. So there's a couple interesting things. I don't know if the next slide has it on or if it's all on this slide. More likely it's all on this slide. But again, you have two devices here. This gives them the ability to upgrade Wi-Fi. So a new Wi-Fi comes out, you can put a new Wi-Fi board and battery in there at the same time. Great design. The cool thing with this, I have to say this, is the way Baxter designed this. Now this device is on the network and you can communicate with it. But if you break into it, or you cause it to crash, or you do something to damage it, it will not bring the pump down. The pump will continue functioning. They kind of live independent of each other. The thing is, though, the pump actually contains Wi-Fi creds stored on a flash memory chip, but so does the battery. So they both do. The killer thing is here, though, is as an example, if I have a unit and I want to get the Wi-Fi creds off this, and I don't want to take it apart, what I can actually do is these two connect together. I got it covered up here, but you have the wires along here, the connectors that connect to this. And when you plug the battery in and power it up, this device will communicate with the battery and actually transfer all of that data over, all of the Wi-Fi pre-shared key passwords over to the battery. So all you have to do is, and I actually built a flexible circuit board shim you could drop in here, drop the battery in, and you can listen to it as it's communicating to the battery, which is crazy. But again, flash memory chips, if you need to take them apart, drop them into a device, pull the flash memory off and read it. But I always like the attacks that are kind of like a little more nuanced. Taking boards apart and pulling chips. Anyone could do that, but how do you take it a little further? So I actually took this unit, as you can see. I hope you can see this. You can see all these wires attached to it. And we had mentioned JTAG, which is the ability to debug an actual circuit board or an actual microcontroller. So what I did was I pulled all of that out of here. So now I can just drop this into a unit. It'll transfer the creds here, and then I can use JTAG to pull the creds off of it. The scary part of this is also, which is one of the vulnerabilities we have, which plays into this whole thing. If I buy a battery, so I could buy a battery for, I actually bought one the other day. I think I paid $50 for this one. This one looks brand new, and this is a newer battery. If I take this battery unit and carry it in my pocket and walk into a hospital and they have a Baxter pump, all I have to do is pull the battery that's in the Baxter pump out, drop my battery in, power the unit up, pull my battery out, put the original back on, and I walk out of the building with your creds. Because getting it off these devices is fairly simple, which is a scary thought. The other issue that we had in reference to it was the purge process. We always want to be able to purge data off these when you're getting rid of them. And it turned out that if you went to purge the data off the Sigma, now this has been fixed for all versions moving forward, but if you went to purge the data off this, it would not purge the data off the battery. So even though you ran it through this purge process to clean it, what it ended up doing, it turned Wi-Fi off before it do the purge. And because of that, the data still remained on the battery. Baxter actually fixed this as a vulnerability, which is cool, which is what we want. But something to think about if you're dealing with old versions of these, you want to make sure that the batteries, because you can have multiple batteries for each unit, that you don't end up selling the batteries without actually going through and making sure they're cleaned, which is critical. So that's something to think about, because I got to a point where it's like, if I want your creds, I'm not really going to keep buying these. These are pricey. I'll just buy the batteries, which are a fraction of the price, and they have the same data.
Really amazing. Just scary and amazing. I keep saying that, but it is. So we've so the third device here. We do have the JTAG analysis and the RS-232, which were a little different.
Yeah, they were. Now, in the paper, I talk about JTAG access to all of the devices, either JTAG or Surwar debug, which is just a smaller subset of JTAG, but it's still the same concept. This one was interesting. Again, we had flash memory. So this device had 2 flash memory chips on it. One flash memory chip only seemed to contain drug library data, so nothing super usable by me, but the other one actually contained the full operating system with all of the Wi-Fi pre-share keys. It was actually on one of these where they had set it up for eat peep communication, which basically means that they had their Active Directory configs in there with an Active Directory password. So an account you can log on to the Windows environment with, which is
so
interesting.
yeah. So explain what you would do with something like that. So versus the pre-shared
Well, you can use
keys.
well, besides, well, with just standard Wi-Fi pre-shared keys, WPA, where you can log onto their Wi-Fi networks, and now I'm on their network. Now, if I log onto their Wi-Fi network doing eat peep with an Active Directory cred, I'm on the network, but now I have an Active Directory cred that I can more likely connect to one of your Active Directory servers and gain some level of access to data or further information for attacks. So it goes a little further. It takes me from just being on your network to being on your network and possibly connected to critical servers.
So that's really where you're getting into what people would call privilege escalation.
Exactly. Now, I surely hope in this particular case, obviously I couldn't test it, that this account had some levels of restrictions. But even with levels of restrictions, if I connect to Active Directory, even though that account may not get me into critical file systems, it does give me access to Active Directory information. That means I can enumerate accounts, groups, other critical information about the entire environment, server information. So instantly I can, if I connect to Active Directory, even with a restricted level account, the amount of data that I can get, I've done this when I was doing pen testing. You gain access to a network, you gain access to Active Directory with some cred that's very limited. Maybe it's from a printer or something like that. But then I can enumerate all the users and all the groups. So now, once I have all the users and all the groups and who belongs into what groups, now I know who I want to attack. And if I can associate them back to machines, instantly I go from who do I attack out of these 5,000 people to, hey, here's the 20 people who maintain all the credit card systems or maintain all the medical record systems. Those are the ones that I'd want to target. Even though an Active Directory account may have restricted access, it still has access to privileged information about the environment that can be an added level of risk that we don't always think about.
So when you were talking about the SSIDs, and so you're grabbing an SSID off of this, or when are those changed? When are those changed out? I guess is the way I would ask the question. So
So
that
that's
you find an old device, you find an old device, and you're like, oh well, it's old. They're probably not using the same SSID or the same information. Is that true?
No, it's not true. Often, when you go into environments where products that are used, that are wireless products, have a long shelf life, OT, SCADA environments, medical environments. These infusion pumps, you don't buy an infusion pump, then 3 years later get rid of it like you do laptops, desktop systems. 3 years and they're out of date. These devices stay around for a while. Often, the only time in any organization I've ever worked on, for them to actually get into really changing things, they end up changing the entire security model. So they go from WPA to, pre-shared keys to WPA Enterprise. So a whole new security model. Usually that's when I see it change. Because in this case here, if I decide that I'm going to get rid of all my infusion pumps, these are not the only devices on my network. We have laptops, desktops that are on critical care networks. We have, oh gosh, units that are used for monitoring patients. We may have other type of infusion pumps. We have printers. I mean, the list goes on. You can literally, in a large hospital, have dozens of different types of products that connect over the Wi-Fi network. And it could easily be thousands or even tens of thousands of devices. So if I decide I'm going to change out 500 of these, do I want to come in and set the new devices with the same password? That's 500 machines. Or do I want to go back and have to change the accounts on 10,000 devices in a large environment? The answer is you're going to leave it the same. Sadly, I always recommend that in the modern day we have access points that have multiple radios in them. So you can literally have access points that have more than one radio in them. So let's say everyone's connecting to something called Med Center 1 is the SSID, and it's WPA pre-shared key 2 with a password. I suggest if you're changing stuff out, that you do a migration process. So every time you get rid of old tech, you spin up another radio and possibly new passwords, new accounts, things like that, and try to migrate everything over, on top of making sure you purge stuff. But again, it's time sensitive. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes resources to do this. So if you think for 1 second that you may have sold gear out the door with your data on it, then I would suggest a plan to actually migrate to something new, something different, maybe something more secure, or at least a different password. And you can often do that by spinning up another set of radios in those environments. You have the legacy stuff, all the new stuff's here, and then over a given period of time, you can migrate things over. And then you're on to the new stuff. Especially if you're dealing with, I don't know what our state is, because we decided to raise money by selling everything we had on eBay, or sold it to somebody who sold everything on eBay. It's kind of a scary thought.
Well, great advice. I mean, just fantastic. I know a lot of people are thinking, oh, I don't, probably need to do that. Don't have the time, but knowing about it and working it into as a part of your go forward, knowing about it is the first step. And
Yep.
you had talked earlier about kind of data purge options. I think just for the sake of making sure that we let people know that there are solutions, and I think some of it largely due to your work. As a part of your work, it's not just finding problems, but I was intrigued with the level of dedication and you working with the manufacturers to make sure that they solve these problems before you release the information. There's a whole process
Right.
that you go through with that, right?
Yes. The ultimate goal is it's all about security, not insecurity. So we want to make things better. and give people options. We want to give organizations and businesses options. And the same way with this here. So we went out and I reached out to Alaris, Baxter, wasn't able to get a hold of Hospira. Hospira products have changed hands like 3 times over the last 5 years or something like that. So trying to get the resource to say, hey, is there documentation for this? We couldn't find it out. Baxter, 100% documentation is there. I've actually tested the documentation. There's new added documentation based on the vulnerabilities we discovered. And we also, in those cases, we talk about methodologies when we were dealing with old devices, how to go through a purge process on top of that. And Baxter also published a series on that. For some of the older software devices moving forward. Alaris has an entire series. I've looked at some of the older Alaris stuff, documentation. I couldn't get my hands on the newest stuff, but I did talk directly with BD, and they assured me that detailed instructions are available, and recommend everyone goes out and reach out to your vendor partner and go, hey, where's the documentation for purging these? How do we go about doing that type of thing? And then what I ask you to do is let's really think about cradle to grave. When we go to buy new technology, don't just focus on deployment. Right out of the get-go, before you buy a product, make sure it can do all these things. So you're eventually going to have to get rid of it. So let's find out ahead of time what the processes are and document those as procedures. That whole cradle to grave. How are we gonna implement it? How are we gonna deploy it? How are we going to maintain patches on these devices moving forward? And how are we going to end the life of the device when it hits that point there? And have all that stuff up front, a entire cradle to grave process. That way, when you get to that final process and go, okay, we need to get rid of those, and everyone goes, well, what do we do now? Well, we sell them to so-and-so, and he gets rid of them on eBay for us. We don't want to do that. We don't want it to be a knee-jerk reaction at the end. We want a defined process to ensure that it's done right, and problems that I found don't exist.
So the in that, I think that's a great lead in to kind of how Medigate actually helps in this process. You know, we do the device discovery better than anybody else out there. Best in class 3 years in a row, which is, for me, that's everything. If you don't know it's on the network, if you don't know that you have this infusion pump and this model, and then you won't know what the vulnerabilities are. So we do it for all technologies, all of the different device types, and then the ability to tell you about that device's vulnerabilities, like the ones we're talking about here. What would you do from a network protection perspective, threat detection, all of the detail on the device, the lifecycle management. Here, like we were talking about, the total cradle to grave, being able to help in the assistance, and then operationalizing it, driving all of this data into the correct applications and security stacks that you have out there. So as we think about maybe how each of these plays out in operationalizing the data, you know, we can think about the different steps here of identifying the device, and then what the indicators of compromise are, so that there's a problem here with this particular device, identifying the CVE, or the particular vulnerability that's associated, because that's out there on to tell you in the National Vulnerabilities Database that, hey, this device has this problem. And specifically the ones that Daryl's been talking about are out there, but you might not know about them. And then the CVSS score on it for severity. You maybe need to do some network segmentation on these devices, or depending upon what the issue is, the device management, understanding, look at all the information you can get about the location, the software versions, the firmware versions, the IP addresses, the MAC. What is the decommissioning policy? And then think about integrating in that with a CMMS, like I'm here today at a ServiceNow function in Columbus, Ohio, here at Topgolf. And I'll be talking about how we take this data and put it into ServiceNow so we can operationalize the the mitigation of these problems, and or for this particular one, as you're decommissioning devices, that it's documented, the policies and procedures are in your workflow and being assigned and accounted for, so that these things don't happen. But again, you need to do it at scale and efficiency, um, you know, based on Deral, what Deral was saying earlier. You got thousands and thousands and thousands of these things. And Deral, you've had some experience in your history with Medigate. Is that correct?
Yeah, I've not used the product, but I've interacted with a number of your team members on this research. I actually interacted with them on some of the vulnerability discover stuff. So
Yeah. So I mean, it's not a reach to say that a hospital having a tool like Medigate provides a great deal of information and to help operationalize the security around this particular issue we're talking about, but others. And then if you want to comment on any of the things you're seeing here, I just wanted to throw up a couple of screenshots to kind of make it all real. Here, when I went into our system and queried on the CVE that you were talking about specifically with the Alaris 8015, you can see that it actually comes up with the description. And so you could always pull the vulnerability up here, and here it's saying that we've got 1,000 of these devices. And as we go to maybe another screen, you can get more detail on that particular the vulnerability information on that device type and what recommendations there are with respect. That's not the only vulnerability on that device. There may be other things that you need to do, and then we could list out all the devices if we wanted to and where they are. That's obviously going to be important if you were going to make any type of changes, or you needed to get to these devices. And then if you drill down into a device, you can see all the different data that's available. Again, some of this, like the software, the firmware version, as Deral was saying, okay, this particular device has a problem if you have only for this particular version of firmware. And therefore you want to know which devices have that particular version of firmware, but you can't get that with a traditional security tool, and or trying to do this on a manual inventory perspective is a fool's errand. By the time you're done doing your inventory, it's out of date. So tons of information here, all needed. And then I circled the SSID there, so it's that's a very real thing. It's tracked as a data element.
Also, I'd like to point out that Rapid7 and Medigate have been partners for a number of years. So there is some level of integration between Rapid7 products and Medigate's products. So if you happen to be currently a Rapid7 customer, reach out to your salesperson and ask them about this if you're not currently using Medigate's product. From what I've seen and the customers I've talked to, that Rapid7 customers that utilize Medigate, I think it's an amazing product, and it brings all of those critical environments and data together. Historically, from threat and vulnerability management type tools, you can't go out and actively scan critical medical networks. The potential impact of crashing devices and causing issues is too high, which is one of the key things why I think Rapid7 and Medigate partnered up together to be able to add that level of insight into the medical environment. I think it's critical and add a lot of value for Rapid7 customers that needed this type of technology.
Yeah, we're one of the things that in that integration. Thank you very much. I totally agree. One of the points to make there is if you have Rapid7 and with Medigate, we can analyze all of the different devices out there, and we can say, here are some that Rapid7 could be monitoring. You have the solution, but it's not set up to do vulnerability management on certain devices because you're worried that it's going to knock them over and it could affect patient care. Well, we can come in and say, oh, these aren't being monitored, but could be. And when you're talking about 50,000 devices, there's, that could be as much as 10%. You could get 10% of that where you're not monitoring, and a 10% increase in what you are monitoring. So it's a great way to further extend your existing tools. I will actually talk about that. No, actually, what we're gonna end there. We're coming up here on the end. But what I would ask Deral is, do you any last thoughts? Anything that we didn't cover that you would want everyone to know? We might have lost Deral. Deral, are you there?
You got me. I'm here. I'm sorry. Can you hear
no
me now? Yeah.
Can hear you now.
Yeah. So the one thing I want to point out is, even though my research focused on infusion pumps, this should apply to all embedded technology that is incorporated in your environment, whether it's medical or enterprise. If you do not have a plan for getting rid of those devices and purging the data off of it, then you're literally giving away critical information. This isn't just a problem with infusion pumps. It goes across the entire gamut of technology within your medical environments that contain data that need to be purged prior to deacquisition.
Awesome. And we've got a QR code there, which will take you to, or you can use that LinkedIn hyperlink URL to go and access the research paper. And I think that everyone will find that. I mean, that was only some of the information. There's obviously, it was so extensive that I don't think we have enough time to cover it all. It was wonderful. I just think that was a brilliant, wonderful, eye-opening paper that, again, focusing on infusion pumps. It's one that everybody, I mean, that's part of one of the main devices everyone has and utilizes. But then, you really can't extend that concept, that philosophy, the understanding of the security issue to other devices. And I would extend it over to building management systems as well. So I think we got 3 minutes left. I don't know if we have any questions out there. And did any questions come in?
Yes, we have got one we can squeeze in. It's directed at you, Deral. Deral, you have some great examples of how easy it can be to leave behind sensitive data on electronics. You have a rare set of skills to be able to acquire sensitive information. While your work is ethical, do you have any real-world examples where successful unethical hacking has occurred with medical devices? And by the way, thank you for a great webinar.
So at this point, I do not have any real world examples that I can point directly at. But, there's the sad thing is we're seeing this in so many industries. This isn't just the medical industry. So if your organization, your hospital's breached via its Wi-Fi network, how do we know it wasn't from this? Is it breached through some other method? So the Active Directory is an example. If I can get Active Directory creds off these devices, can I breach you from the internet with those? Are any of the breaches that have taken place been traced back to exactly the cause? And not always, not all of them have been. We know we've been breached, malware has been deployed. We're seeing more and more medical organizations targeted that way, which is scary. So even though I can't give you an exact example we can point at, the probability is going up daily that this is going to occur. And the impact, if it does occur, is obviously going to be very significant, and we need to avoid that at all costs.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ty and Deral, for your time and for a very eye-opening and informative presentation. I'd like to encourage everyone to visit today's sponsor website to learn more about the services that provide to our industry. So please visit clarity.com. As promised, the answer to today's trivia question is pink. So congratulations to our winner, Todd Johnson. And just a quick reminder, you can obtain your C certificate by completing the post-webinar survey, which will be emailed 1 hour after the completion of today's webinar. You must complete the survey to receive your 1 CE credit from the ACI, and you'll be able to download the certificate directly from your computer once the survey is submitted. If you have any questions at all, you can reach us at webinar@mdpublishing.com. We'll be back next week with another webinar, so please visit webinarwednesday.live for more details and, of course, complimentary registration. Thank you once again for your time today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.